Hello, my name is Lucinda and I am with the ASU Office of Inclusive Design. In this video, I will be discussing strategies to make your classroom accessible to all students. First of all, accessibility concerns are not just important to consider for students with disabilities, but also commuter students, student parents, ESL students, and a wide variety of others. The UW is a diverse school and many students have a variety of learning styles and accommodation needs. So these are just a few of the groups of students that may benefit from you having a more accessible classroom. There are several steps you can take before the start of class to make your classroom accessible. So the first thing you can do is assign accessible instructional materials. Before publishing and starting your class, ensure course materials are available and accessible online in PDF formats. You can check EPUB 3 standards of accessibility. And this is important because students with cognitive, motor, learning, and visual disabilities can all benefit from online materials that are screen reader accessible, do not require the use of a mouse, and can have the font size altered. Making sure your course materials are available online instead of requiring physical textbooks also makes them more financially accessible. Many textbooks are available as ebooks or PDFs. If you're only using certain chapters from a book, consider scanning them and converting them to accessible PDFs. That way the students don't have to buy the entire textbook. Another important thing is to make course materials accessible on your course website. This provides students with mental illness, student parents, commuter students, students with learning disabilities, students with cognitive disabilities, and students who had to miss class for reasons of illness, family emergency, and mental physical health issues with an equal opportunity to learn from course materials, regardless of what is happening in their lives outside of school. So this is such things as publishing a worksheet that you're going to be working on during class. Another thing to consider is building your curriculum with different learning types in mind. So everybody learns differently. So providing multiple pathways to the same content can benefit all students. For example, if you assign readings, making sure that you use a document that is screen reader accessible. This will help both visual and auditory learners have access to resources that work with their learning styles. Similarly, if you can find videos or multimedia that describe the same materials, make sure to provide your students with those resources as well. It can also be helpful to provide a variety of types of projects to earn grades. Some students may struggle with test taking, while others may struggle with group projects. Using a variety of assignments can make it so that all students have a chance to earn a good grade and learn in a way that works for them. Another important thing is to make sure that your documents and PowerPoints are accessible. You can follow our video on this topic coming soon. Caption and make sure, of course, that you caption videos. For deaf and hard of hearing individuals, video captioning is a necessary element of effective learning and communication. If you record lectures through Zoom or Panopto, make sure you enable captioning and or transcription services so individuals who need to watch course content asynchronously can do so without access barriers. Additionally, if you assign videos or podcasts, make sure that there are accurate captions or transcripts available for these resources. If you are presenting through Microsoft PowerPoint, you can also turn on live captioning services for your presentation. The last thing to do before you start class is make sure that there's alt text available for images that are going to be on your website. Alt text for images is necessary to provide for students with a visual impairment. Without alt text, these students will miss the contextual cues or important information conveyed but carefully by your visual selected content. You can do this in the notes section of PowerPoints, below images on slides and documents, through creation of accessible PDFs in Adobe Acrobat. If you need assistance creating accessible teaching materials, please contact ASUW OID at uw.edu. Finally, you should also make sure that your visual on the same line, make sure that your visual materials are accessible. For visual materials like PowerPoints, posters, and paper materials, make sure your document is available with large print and braille formats. Make sure all visual materials are high color contrast for individuals with visual impairments. Now, here are some tips for during class accessibility. Make sure that you provide trigger warnings for any sensitive material. Many topics, including sexual assault, violence, racism, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, suicidality, self-harm, mental illness, physical or psychological abuse, and many more can create an unsafe learning environment for many students, which inhibits their ability to participate fully in the course. Providing trigger warnings can help potentially prevent traumatization or any psychological detriment from taking place in your classroom environment. Using a microphone for in-person lectures is another important step. Using microphones is helpful for both in-person and asynchronous learners. Individuals who are hard of hearing identify and benefit from microphone use while attending in-person lectures, especially in large lecture halls where the acoustics are not optimal. Students watching Panopto recordings also benefit from microphone usage, as it may be difficult to hear recordings without a microphone depending on where the recording equipment is placed in the classroom. It's also important to make your classes asynchronously available. Through resources provided by the university, all faculty members have the opportunity to make their courses accessible to any students who cannot make it to class for any reason. By making course materials, quizzes, tests, and participation available online asynchronously, students can keep up with the coursework and lectures when they're unable to attend class in person. Asynchronous learning accessibility is specifically paramount to the creation of inclusive learning environments during the COVID pandemic. While some students may be excited to return to in-person learning, others may feel uneasy about the transition due to health concerns, living with individuals within vulnerable populations, financial stress that create barriers in finding housing close to UW, and more. Especially as we're entering the fourth wave of this pandemic, it's important that providing asynchronous learning options. Providing these asynchronous learning options removes barriers that are currently being faced by many students and make the general learning environment at UW more inclusive. And please make sure that when you're doing this, all of the online content includes either CART captioning or ASL interpreters as well. Showing students lenience with deadlines can also prevent barriers to full and equal access in the classroom participation. It's also important to be sure to provide clear and detailed grading criteria so that all students have the highest possibility of success in your classroom. Avoiding ambiguity in the curriculum and grading criteria makes classrooms more accessible to disabled and non-disabled students. It's also important to make sure that your space is physically accessible. Now, this can be difficult, as I know that professors don't always have their choice over where their class is being held, but there are several things you can do. So one thing you can do is make it a scent-free space. Individuals with allergies and chemical sensitivities may not be able to learn in spaces with strong scents. In order to create a scent-free space, simply ask all students not to wear/use products with strong scents during class. Also make sure that, this is very important, ensure that your teaching space is wheelchair accessible. Regardless of the classroom space you're assigned, you can make this space as physically accessible as possible by doing the following. Make sure furniture is spread out enough to make the space accessible for students with mobility aids. Remove any hazards such as loose cards, miscellaneous items from the floor. You can also, if your classroom is not physically accessible, request through the UW to transfer to a different classroom. Also important to respect your students' identities. Some tips for this are asking students to state pronouns. You can do this through a form, or you can do it through a introductory activity. Asking individuals to verify their pronouns will make the space much more accessible for students, as it creates a space for everyone to clarify how they identify and removes the burden of correcting those who misgender others. And along the same lines, it's important to verify preferred names, individuals who may use names that are different from those listed on the student directory. Asking everyone to say their name before speaking is an easy way to make sure they're being addressed the way they're comfortable with. And finally, we need to discuss creating a learning environment that is inclusive for all students. So one thing that is really important is you should always ask students if they need any reasonable accommodation that is not provided by the DRS, even if they're DRS students. DRS does not always provide comprehensive accommodation. Some students register with the DRS too late to receive accommodations for a specific quarter, and some students avoid formal disability registration services due to the negative stigma surrounding disability. In these cases, doing what you can to make your course more accessible to students can mitigate many learning barriers. Ensure an accessible learning space by setting core standards that celebrate and include all the diverse identities held by UW students. If you have any additional questions or need additional support or resources, please contact the Office of Inclusive Design at ASUW OID at uw.edu. Thank you so much.